between the information that the provider and the client have about each other, so that the client can actually decide if the product that the provider is offering is good for its price. But this is not the case with education, because the provider can easily access statistics about what the clients want and actually have a really good PR that seems to target what they want without providing it. Why? Because the clients have little to no information about how the school spends its budget, how much actually goes into the pocket of the owner or in the education, what happens every day in their children's classroom, and what happens in other classrooms in other schools, thus to compare the products and decide. And even if they know all this, there are numerous parents who do not have the time to look for this information because they have free jobs, especially in disenfranchised communities. And in general, education is very hard to assess on the short term. So we tell you that if the school gives parents reports showing straight A's, but so it seems like the children are doing great, the parent seems satisfied, is going to stay there, but the children are going to receive a very bad education. We saw this in the example of Ivy Academy, a privately run school in Florida, which was closed after only 7 weeks. Why? Because they had really good advertisement, but did not have actually a school, a building. Because we open the cases for these kind of abuses, we please you to oppose the motion.
I would like to thank the second speaker of opposition for their speech. And I would like to invite the third speaker of the proposition to deliver their speech.
The largest problem with side opposition is that they have been uncomparative within this debate. On both sides of the house, there's an equal sum of money. The question is, where is the money going to? On side opposition, you'll give it directly to public schools. On side proposition, we made it very clear that we will give it to parents who will then choose to give it to a public or private school of their choice. Our claim for first speaker is this, that we give parents choice, which is a good thing because parents can choose to send their children to better schools. And before I move on, let's just point out that opposition had no positive material about what they are going to do with the money they have. We told you that if you give public schools money, they are not going to spend it well. This means that on opposition, their policy of giving money to public schools has no effect at all. You might as well give it to everyone in this room here, because at least you can buy candy with it. If you give it to public schools on their side, they do nothing with it and they waste it. We stand against that. Let's then move on to the two questions in today's debate. The first, on whether or not students who choose to leave for private schools, and the second question, on students who choose to stay in public schools. Let's just move on to but before that, let's just deal with a few red herrings that they threw out within their speeches. First, they said that we'll only fund rich people. This is not true. Our policy has a standard of means testing. This means that if you're a rich individual, you'll get significantly less money than the poor individual who will get way more money via a school voucher system. They then told us about embezzlement. Embezzlement is clearly illegal on both sides of the house. We don't need to stand for that. They said this was against the idea of equality. I'd like to take down this word of equality. Equality doesn't mean that you send every student to the same school, but rather, equality means that we give students the money they deserve, which is what our side gives. I think equality is less important than maximizing the potential of every single student, something that our side does. No thank you. The last red herring they threw out was that of public pressure. I think public pressure exists on both sides of the house. On our side, there will be public pressure for governments to give more money so that parents can access better private schools. In fact, I don't think that the public pressure exists on their side, because historically, public pressure on governments to improve hasn't worked, because there's no incentive for them to improve if there's no competition. Let's move on to the first question. an analysis on students who choose to leave for private schools. I'm going to prove to you two things here. The first is to show why students can choose to leave, and the second, why this choice is a good thing. So opposition makes a few claims here to poo-poo on our policy altogether. Their main attack was that schools won't open altogether. There are two structural broad reasons why they will actually open. We know very clearly from first speaker. First, there are monetary reasons why they are open. So these are all the profit incentives they talked about. They claim there was a high startup cost. Well, if there's a high startup cost, that just means that you need greater investment. That's why, for example, Excel schools decided to list their company for initial public offering on the stock market to get more funds from the very start. They claim, for example, they will jack up prices. No, we told you very clearly, second speaker, this is not true. No response from their side. But further, I think that given the profit incentive of these companies, they have incentive to tailor programs for specific communities. There's no point opening up and charging $10,000 a month for a private school if everyone in the town cannot afford it. So obviously they'll cater their program. This makes perfect sense. The second is that there are multiple non-monetary incentives as well. They claim that private schools will only enroll smart students and this will entrench inequality. This is not true. There are many non-monetary reasons why private schools will open in maybe poorer districts as well. Things like, for example, how they want to look good and it's good PR when they open in a poorer community. Things like, for example, how schools want to be seen as improving students. What Ryan talked to you about, when it's seen as easier to improve a student from an F to a B than it is from B grade to an A grade. Further, there are many other non-academic reasons why they accept students as well. Things like sports scholarships, for example, or dance competitions if their students do well in dance. The conclusion of this is I've given you monetary reasons, no thank you, and non-monetary reasons why there will be schools that open. So that next speaker tell us that there will be no competition or no private schools that open because I've given you a plethora of reasons why this is the case. But before I move on, sure.
These non-monetary reasons pale in comparison with the ability to make more profit out of talented kids that will perform well anyway and have lower effective costs.
No, we think that means that on our side, private schools will open up a certain school for certain academically more inclined students, but that doesn't mean that they will not open up schools for other students as well, because there's still profit there to be made as well. I don't understand why the outside doesn't understand the idea of profit. If there's more profit, private schools will go in, regardless of the type of students that are existent there. No thank you. Let's then move on to the second thing we told you. Having proven that there will be multiple private schools, we told you that this choice was good. There are only new push in second speaker said this choice was a bad thing. Let's just point out that the second speaker basically parroted everything the first speaker said, while still doing their substantive regardless. We told you very clearly this was patronizing. We told you how this logic can be expanded to all forms of welfare. No response from their side of the house. They gave two new lines of attack. First, they told us that the effects of this will come in the long term, so you cannot see anything. No, this is not true. There are often reviews from other individuals who have went to the schools. You can go for trial lessons to see whether or not you like the curriculum of the school. So it's just not true that the short-term idea is a problem. Second, they say that multiple parents got 2 or 3 jobs. Well, again, this is not a problem. I think that the decision of where to send a child is the most important decision a poor parent might need to make, because this can allow you to uplift your entire family out of poverty. The conclusion of this is that they will actually spend time researching or going to the internet for research. I don't think that these things are actually that hard. The conclusion of this is that, again, we have multiple choices for parents, and parents will make good and tailored choices. What are the benefits that their side never dealt with? This leads to 2 benefits that their side never wanted to touch. The first is that parents get to access higher quality schools. But second, also we have more specialization as well. It's not just this idea, it looks like the idea of sports, for example, outside of the house. So if your child is more inclined and talented in sports, you can go to a school that focuses on sports, where everyone around you is equally devoted to training in the sports community. All of these are benefits on our side of the house. No thank you. Let's move on to the second question on students who choose to stay in public schools. I'm going to do 2 things here. First, I'm going to show how we improve public schools, and second, even if that's not the case, why outside benefits the entire community as a whole. We set up very clearly a problem in first speaker that they never dealt with, that schools are overcrowded. This means on their side, if more students no thank you go to public schools, there will be even more overcrowding. Further, we know that reducing students is a good thing. They gave 2 responses here. The first was to tell us that there was fixed cost of a school. Well, I think the fixed cost of a school exists when we build the school, and not whether or not how many students are there in the school to study. So I think the idea of fixed cost is not a problem. They told us that Chile had bad governments. Well, if that's the case, I think that will be even worse to let governments operate public schools on their side of the house. But I gave you multiple structural reasons to show why governments cannot spend the money well. It looks like the lack of incentive to do so because there's no competition. It looks like, for example, teachers' unions demanding for more money when this policy is implemented. So here are a few reasons that their side needs to deal with to show us why the comparative is better. But even if we consider that not many students go to private schools, we gave you a second speaker substantive on how we uplift the entire community. They are only exposed to all of this, so to tell us that not everyone will be Oprah Winfrey. Well, I think when multiple students go to multiple good schools, they don't need to be huge public figures, but many of them can contribute back their own way. When they become lawyers and doctors, for example, or teachers going back to their community to help their students. All of these are clear benefits they talk about. In fact, they want another example. Think about Clarence Thomas, the Supreme Court judge who was born in Savannah, Georgia, who then went back to build schools and a historical preservation center for their side. At the end of the day, we recognize that education should not be reserved for the elite. We propose.
I would like to thank the third speaker of proposition for their speech, and I would like to invite the third speaker of the opposition to deliver their speech.
It is true that private for-profit schools will want to attract as many parents as possible, right? But they made a huge mistake in their case, assuming that the way that you attract those parents is by providing with the best quality education ever. This is not the case. You attract parents by fooling them, by having a good PR stance, by giving their children good grades even when they don't deserve them, right? Showing that you provide a good education when in fact you are not. By giving them fake prizes for a lot of extracurricular activities that you may have not even had, right? This is all the PR stance that we see private for-profit schools that have in this system as well, but will increase significantly when you allow them to take money out of the government, right? So we are telling you that you don't have an incentive for good education, you have an incentive to fool parents into letting their children go to your school. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about the quality of education that they no thank you will provide. Because they recognize for the first speech that in order to give better quality education is to invest more money in the system, right? They are going to invest more money with the vouchers than the already money that go now in the system. We are telling you that by giving more money in the system, no thank you, without imposing the school voucher system, we can deal with overcrowdment because we can have the money to open new buildings. We can deal with the overworked teachers because we have the money to pay for more teachers, right? So this is not a benefit from the voucher system, but it is a benefit from the fact that they are going to give more money, they're going to pump more money into the system via higher voucher system than we already have in the system, not exclusively. They never understood that. Now, so let's talk a bit about, no thank you, let's talk a bit about the incentives, right? So they tell us right now, we give some money into the system and they don't have the schools, because they're public and can make profit, don't have the incentive to invest in like those assets that we need for a good education, because coincidentally, pumping a lot of money into the education means good education. You have fixed costs, buildings, heat, electricity, laboratories, good varied specialized teachers, books, equipment, so on and so forth, right? So we are telling you that public schools have to invest in all those assets. Why is that? Because they have to give reports at the end of how they invested the money from the government. They cannot simply take the money and put them in their pockets. How they think it would be a better investment, right? They don't have what to do with this money. They are forced to invest them in good assets for the schools providing good education, right? So we are telling you, no thank you, that they are more likely, like the school, because it is cheaper for those for-profit schools to attract teachers, is to invest in PR stunts and advertising, than to actually invest in those, no thank you, in quality, things that are actually provide quality for education. This is how they make profit and lower the education. So in their best case scenario, if we are to invest the same amount of money into the system that we already do, and more schools will open, what happens is that you're going to have to divide the already existing money in the system into more schools, and that means less money per school, which means less quality education, because you don't have the money to pay more teachers, you don't have the money for equipments, for books, for laboratories, rest, because there are less money. This is their best case scenario, and we see that this doesn't provide quality education. Now I'm going to talk a bit about, but before I'm going to talk about choice, yes.
Your side relies on governments checking on themselves to improve the school system. Isn't it better on our side when we have first-hand reviews from parents that can go over the smoke and mirrors of PR that your side claims on our side?
We are telling you, what I'm going to explain right now is how some parents, like maybe the elite parents that have a stay-at-home parent, can actually assess this quality education. But for some that have a lot of, have more than one job that they can attend, that have to work, that have to take care of their children regardless of the time they spend in schools, right? They just don't have the money to invest in checking whether or not they provide quality education or not. And here I'm going to talk about choice, because they tell us that choice is inherently good, but we see that this is just not the case. And now I'm going to talk a bit about the segregation that happens, right? Because what we explained from the beginning, even if you have a different, progressive voucher system, what happens is here that you give X dollars to the rich individuals, Y dollars to the poorer individuals, but the elite schools, the already private schools, are going to have the fee, X dollars that you give the rich individuals, plus a greater amount of money than you give to the poor individuals, because they want to keep their elite schools, right? And this is why segregation is still going to happen. But what is significantly worse is that the segregation will happen on the money of government, defunding the public schools, letting the poor individuals stay in those public schools. Why it is problematic, right? So they tell us that there's already going to be an incentive to take low-performing students, because it is easier to raise them from F to B rather than B to A. But they conceded here with the principle that parents care about grades, not about the actual performance of students. This is to say that you're just going to give them A's to everyone in order to show that you have good quality education. This is what happens, no thank you, on their side of the house. Then they have this whole argument about how you need to make that even if there's going to only be a few number of underprivileged children going to the really privileged schools, they're still going to be able to give back to the community. Right? We never did on our side of the house that we need to have a zip code allocation or put all the poor people into one hand. Right? We're saying that this happens by having a by mixing students in the current public system. Right? We see that this happens in Finland. Right? You have rich children, poor children in the same system. Same thing happens. You allow them to have the same good education. No, thank you. We allow them to have the same good education. We believe that this is how you empower them to give back to their community. And now let's talk a bit about assessing children, because we believe that this is a fundamental, no thank you, mistake that team proposition has to take when they tell us that just because you care and it is so easy to search the internet, you automatically know what's the best for your children. Because we tell you that in most instances, you cannot, no thank you, properly assess your child. Why is that? Because you simply don't believe that maybe your child is a good performer, right? Because you weren't able to get a good education and you believe that your child is just like you. Or you over-evaluate him. You believe that he's the best student ever and he has to go to the best school ever. That is to say that you are situation which they can then assess what is best for them to study further, right? But we also had a point in which you talk about indoctrinating your own children, right? You're telling in the worst case scenario, if you have strong religious beliefs, you're likely to give them those money to religious schools that indoctrinates them. Why do checks and balances don't work in this system? Because the checks and balances that we have in this in the status quo are the parents. Because you have a plethora of parents in a school. Therefore, if they are not taught factual stuff, for example, they are going to signal that to the government, right? When the parents choose to go to that schools where not taught factual stuff, you cannot do anything. They will not sign up for all of those reasons. Vote with in Romania.
I would like to thank the third speaker of opposition for their speech. I would like to invite the vice speaker of team opposition to deliver the final speech on their side.
Panel. Even when in Chile, the Chilean government increased subsidies for low-income communities and offered them more voucher money, it was too late. Because segregation already happened. High-income students already lived in good educational environments, in good private education. And even if private schools were emerging, it was too late because their children were already sentenced to an environment for low-income communities. First question, is school choice the engine of a better education? Their main claim here is that school choice creates the ability to not have dilapidated classrooms to pay teachers better. We tell you that this is not because of the false impression of choice and competition that is not actually true. Because there is no offer in the moment in which high entry barriers are in place when it comes to education. It is hard to open a school because you have to have a building, you have to have teachers, you have to have materials, computers, laboratories. In the moment in which there is no offer to be held, there is no meaningful choice to be made. We tell you that the ability to not have dilapidated classrooms is inherently to allocating 20% of GDP to education, just like Singapore does without the school voucher. The ability to offer money to education is what makes education better, not school choice. Now let's talk about school choice, because we claimed from the first speaker that there's a mirage of improvement. Statistically showing, we've told you that it is only increasing parental satisfaction, but it is not increasing actual improvement of education, just like Chile. It made education worstly segregated, and it actually stifles further reform, because it gives the mirage that everything is solved because you can now choose, but you cannot choose when you don't have an alternative. We told you about segregation. They never engage. In their best case scenario, in which schools even open for poor children, they will open only for poor children. There will be private schools that are designated to very rich children that can pay more than the voucher, just like their first speaker conceded. And there will be schools that are open for children that are from low-income communities who are easier to be fooled because unfortunately they're disenfranchised, ladies and gentlemen, and they will be segregated there. But moreover, about parental choice, because they said that parents care, and we agree, parents fundamentally care, but unfortunately there are parents around the world who didn't get a good education and thus are unable to fundamentally assess the future of their children. And for these children in particular, the state has to be there in order to take a meaningful choice for them and not sentence them to the same choices, bad choices that their parents made. Finally, here about schools shutting down, because they never engage. They try to romanticize schools shutting down with changing schools and how this is good. But fundamentally, schools shutting down is an infringement on their right to get to a good education. The fact that certain schools will be closed and until they will have to travel to another school and find another option, they won't have the right to an education. Finally, who offers better education to low-income communities? because their whole analysis hinge on the fact that they offer progressive vouchers and more money to the poor. And this is the analysis on why incentives work. But the first speaker conceded that they will allow rich people to spend more than the voucher. This means that private enterprises will assess that it is more profitable to occupy the market for rich people who are able to pay more than the voucher, and the entire comparative advantage of a progressive voucher is removed in the moment in which the purchasing power of rich people is still valid. They lose the comparative advantage on their side. If you can pay more, the private enterprise will be focused still on rich individuals. Finally, the fact that you uplift communities. We tell you that this is not inherent to vouchers. It is inherent to our system. A system such as Finland, where you mix abilities, when you mix ethnicities, when you mix everything and uplift everyone collectively, because you don't segregate. Because the only inherent conclusion here is segregation. We do not stand for segregation. We stand for collective upliftment. Please vote for opposition.
I would like to thank the reply speaker of Team Opposition for the speech. I would like to invite the reply speaker for Team Proposition to deliver the final speech of the debate.
By the end of third op, their case had shrunk and been reduced to the most exploitative of private schools that give their students fake grades. We told you that avoids the majority of where this debate takes place. We told you being poor is not a synonym for being dumb and naive. We gave you 3 reasons why poor parents can still make good choices. First, the fact that we can expose them to things like trial classes. Second, the fact that they know this is the most important choice they're making for their child, so they will make sure to spend time on it. 3, that over time, it's pretty clear that if you give a fake grade, your child doesn't get into university because the university finds out. And then parents find out through first-hand reviews and stop sending their child to that school anymore. They evade the majority of this debate. Because the majority of this debate, the comparative is this. On the other side, a child goes home and complains that an overworked teacher doesn't pay attention to him, that he is squeezed in a small classroom with 40 other students. On our side, he goes home and tells his mother that he has a new classroom with air conditioning where he can learn because teachers actually pay attention to him. On the other side, a child who's good in sports has to go to a bad public school with no sports track. On our side, he goes to a school with sporting facilities. And I would suggest it's pretty hard for a private school to hide the fact that he has a non-existent sports track, but it's pretty clear whether the sports track actually exists or not. So to be clear, we told you, let us start and understand that the world of the opposition is an exploitative world that harms children. Finally, in their third op, they tell us why money is good because it can help you open a new school building. It kind of contradicts the logic about fixed costs, but we told you the problems lie deeper than that, how there is no incentive to use it properly. Again, finally in third op, we hear the first response that you have to send reports to the government. We give you a POI pointing out how the government is checking on itself and there's no incentive to do this well. But more importantly, we told you how the bureaucratic structures of the government and how many of these public schools know how to game the system after a while because the standard checklist becomes norms among these public schools. Means that in many cases, they have to stand for public schools that are substandard. Particularly, they want to fight this debate in Chile, but I would suggest the government isn't as good as they want to paint it to be. They talk a lot about segregation, but I would suggest that their world is the world of segregation. Because it is in their world that income means you are segregated and kept away in a public school that has overcrowded teachers, overworked teachers and overcrowded classrooms. I would suggest that their world is the world of segregation, because that is when parents cannot send their children to the schools they want to send their children to. What then is the world of proposition? We told you that the world of proposition is a world of greater choice. We give you many systemic reasons, structural reasons, for why private schools have an incentive to cater to these students. Again, finally in third op, we hear the first response, the idea of how we concede through our F to B and B to A logic that these schools care about grades. No, we gave you as one of a spectrum of things that these private schools care about. So we leave along the line in terms of monetary incentives and non-monetary incentives. As my third speaker told you, there is a reason why they won't price out these poorer students. Maybe the richest of schools will still be out of reach, but at least we give a vast majority of students a greater access to all of these schools. She said it's a concession because we allow wheelchair parents to use their own money. No, it's not a concession. It's how every single system of welfare works. And we think it's clear that on our side, at least we do something to increase choice. They said in third op again that they may use religious schools, and that's bad because of indoctrination. And I know that I did not hear this until third op on religion, but I would suggest that in most cases, they would probably indoctrinate their children at home anyway, and it's probably not a comparative. But the point is this, we think what we allow many of these students to access is private schools that are specialized. And again, the real clear response comes in third op when she says, but we don't think specialized schools are a good thing. Without actually telling us why we think it's a good thing. When a student who is good at sports gets a sporting track, when a student who is good at science gets science labs. And more importantly, we told you, we increase and uplift everyone in the community. Recognize that they never actually deal with our logic on stigma, which I gave you in the second speaker. Why we decrease the stigma and stereotypes that are attached to these bad students attending elite institutions. More importantly, we take away segregation, because now we allow you to access schools that are better for your child. We believe that education should not be reserved for the elite